What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to Talkin BS. I am your host, as always, Steven Zamora. If you can, please consider following me on Twitter, as it is the best place for any and all show updates. It is the best place for, my minute-to-minute thoughts on what's going on with the NBA. I post trade ideas and stuff that I have, working on these off-season previews and stuff like that. So you kind of get like a little sneak peek of what my mind's thinking as I'm working through these previews, all kinds of fun stuff like that. I'm also releasing my NBA draft big board on Twitter and on TikTok as well. So just made a brand new TikTok account. So if you can follow me on TikTok at talkin.bs on TikTok as well. Releasing my NBA draft big board right now. I'm going to hopefully after today be done with the lottery. So, some good content there to check out as well. Really cool little video breakdowns showing you every draft prospects like size and what they did at the combine. And then like their season review with like points per game, assists per game, rebounds, all that stuff. And then like a nice little blurb just kind of explaining who they are in context with their stats and their measurements and stuff like that, plus a list of their strengths. So it's a really cool little breakdown I like to put out there for everybody to kind of get a better idea of what's going on with the draft. But you are not here for the draft. You are here to do an offseason preview for the Minnesota TimberWolves. So let's get into it. Run it back. Thank you so much for being here and enjoying the show. I appreciate you guys making it through the entire thing and my whole spiel. You guys have a wonderful day. I'm just kidding. No, we are going to get into it. We're going to get into the weaknesses that Minnesota needs to improve on. We're going to go over the tools that you have to address those weaknesses. We're going to put together a nice checklist of things that Tim Connelly and that front office must address before they go any further with this team. Then we're going to get into the fun stuff, right? We're going to get into trades, some free agency options, the draft, all that fun stuff. And at the end, hopefully all that will lead to a nice 10-man rotation that, you guys up in the land of the lakes can be really excited about heading into the next season. So without further ado, let's get into it. The Minnesota Timberwolves offseason preview. So you were 22nd in the league in points per game, but you were first in the league in points allowed per game. You were 29th in fast break points, 22nd in assist to turnover ratio, 24th in field goals made per game, 30th in field goal attempts per game, 23rd in three-point attempts per game, 23rd in offensive rebounding, and 20th in fouls per game. So the big ones there, in my opinion, are the fast break points weren't a really good transition team despite having the best defense in the league. And also 23rd in three-point attempts per game. I think that would really help your guys' team a whole lot if you can get some more three-point attempts up. We just saw the Boston Celtics win with that formula, win the NBA Finals. So, I think that's kind of the formula that Minnesota can kind of, take and copy. I mean, it is a copycat league after all. And we do have some ways to improve this team, right? Including the 27th overall pick in the NBA draft. You have the 37th overall pick in the second round. Karl Anthony Towns, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Wendell Moore Jr.'s contracts are all tradable. Minnesota has $192 million in committed salary going into the new season, well above the second apron. You still owe your 25 and 27 picks to Utah. You owe a swap in 26. Your 2029 pick is top 5 protected, and you do own your 2028 and your 2030 first. So with an idea of where we need to improve and, the kind of things that we have in our arsenal to improve this team, let's put together a good checklist of things that I think that Tim Connelly should be looking toward to improve this team. A big one is Ant's development, right? As long as he stays on track, trending towards an MVP caliber season next year, in my opinion. I think he could be up there as one of the top 5 players in the entire league by next year. So Ant's development is going to be huge. You're going to have to get used to being a tax team. You have way too much talent on this team to think otherwise. But we are going to try to find a way, despite that, to improve this offensive creation on this team. There were problems in the playoffs where you were running into anytime you didn't have Conley on the floor. There was a little bit of staleness within the offense. The offense in general was sort of a stale offense. So definitely going to need to add some creation. That includes adding some juice and some youth, right? I want to add some more athleticism to the team. Transition offense just was not your guys' forte last year, despite having such a great defense. So we definitely want to add some, young athletes on the team. But at the end of the day, just want to stay on track with how much this team has improved and, build on the culture that you guys have already built there. So first things first, let's look at the NBA draft because that is coming up in the next week or so. So you have the 27th overall pick in the draft. On your left is a big board provided by CBS. On your right is a big board provided by Tankathon. That big one in the middle is going to be provided by The Ringer. So the way I've described this draft is you have like your top 5 guys. There's not a huge gap between between lottery to like 30, like literally like the end of the lottery to 30 is kind of just like a take your pick of like what kind of player you really like. So as you can see, like the comps, there's some good comps in there with like guys, that are role players, right? There's like Jalen Duren's, Lou Williams, Jared Dudley's, Jalen Smith's, right? A lot of guys who are like really good role players, but, none of them are really compared to, all-star talent or anything like that. So I heard John Wasserman on the Hardwood Knocks podcast say this line that, I've kind of stuck with. And if you're a subscriber, you heard me say this before. But if you are new here, this is going to hopefully give you some perspective on like how this draft kind of works. It's just going to be harder to identify where the stars are. It's not that there's not going to be any stars in this draft. It's just going to be harder to identify those. So picking 27, you guys don't necessarily need a star, right? You have your guys in Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, Jaden McDaniels, but to find some depth there, I think would be really smart. And I want to pick somebody who's kind of fits the culture, right? I want to pick somebody who, this team was built on defense. So, I think it would be pretty smart to go and pick somebody who's, arguably the best defender in the class. That's Ryan Dunn out of Virginia University. So he's a 6'7", 213-pound wing. He only averaged 8 points, 1 assist, and 7 boards a game because his offense just really needs some work. 55% from the field isn't too bad, but that 20% from 3, 53% free throw percentage, he definitely needs to work on his shot. His shooting is pretty bad. He really provides almost nothing on offense. He's not a playmaker. He doesn't have a very good handle. He's not a good shooter. He doesn't screen well. He's still, he's very inconsistent offensively. Now that 8 points per game, a lot of that is based on transition because he is a very good athlete. He's one of the better athletes in the entire draft, right? You're picking later on, so you're going to have flaws with these guys. His strength, like I said, is being the best defender in the class. In my opinion, he is. I think he is the best defender in the draft. The comp to OG Anunoby is really how I feel about this kid. He has size, he has athleticism, he can jump out of the gym, really good at anticipating stuff on defense. He has really good defensive instincts as well. The motor is just nonstop. He flies around, he gets rebounds, he's all over the floor. He just plays really hard, and he's a really good kid. I just think he has a lot of really good upside. Minnesota's in a position where they can use guys who are going to contribute right away. And this kid, he requires a little bit more development. But I would say the reason I really like this pick for you guys is because, yes, he does need a little bit of development, but he also, with the way that you guys play and what you guys would expect of him, he could contribute right away in your guys' system. I think he'd be a really good fit. And I get it. You have Nickeil Alexander-Walker, you have Jaden McDaniels, you have Anthony Edwards, right? You have a lot of perimeter stoppers already. So it kind of seems like you're beating a dead horse with this. I want to fix the offensive creation, so I came up with the trade. That way, Ryan Dunn can get some playing time, and then you also fix some offensive creation problems. Now, this is a guy I targeted that I think could really help you guys. Nickeil Alexander-Walker to Charlotte for Seth Curry. Let's understand why Charlotte would do this. Charlotte didn't really use Seth Curry too much last year after they acquired him from Dallas in that PJ Washington and Grant Williams trade. So they would immediately be bringing in somebody like Nickeil Alexander-Walker who could potentially even start next to LaMelo Ball and be a really good fit there. They need somebody next to LaMelo who can come in and play some really good defense, who can hit his open threes. And he fits the timeline. I think he's 24, 25 years old. So he fits the timeline in Charlotte. I just think he'd be a really good fit there, even if he comes off of the bench, right? I think Cody Martin started for the Hornets at the 2 for most of the season last year. So, even if you bring him off of the bench, I think he's just a really good fit regardless. I mean, you have Wasa Micic, you have Trey Mann, either way, Nickeil Alexander-Walker fits any scheme. defensively. So Minnesota, you bring in a three-point creator, a guy who has played the point guard, who has played the two guard, has a ton of gravity with his shooting, is a good creator off of the bounce, is a decent playmaker. That shot creation though, I think is the biggest thing. I think, bringing in a guard who can bring the ball up, right? Like I said, had a lot of troubles in the playoffs whenever Mike Conley wasn't able to do his thing and feel comfortable because you didn't really have another reliable point guard. You had Monte Morris, but he was kind of a liability. And then you tried Nickeil Alexander-Walker, but he just wasn't really, enough of a threat offensively. So I think Seth Curry kind of brings a little bit of both to that. Plus, he adds a really good three-point threat. He can bring the ball up for you as a secondary creator or an initial creator if you wanted to. If you wanted him as a backup to Conley, or you could put him at the two guard and play him off ball and let him do some movement shooting. So with the draft out of the way and that trade out of the way, let's take a look at free agency because you got a couple free agents coming off the books here. So Minnesota's top 7 will all be under contract heading into next season. So that includes Karl-Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, Anthony Edwards, McDaniels, Naz Reid, Mike Conley, Alexander Walker. That money would be swapped for Seth Curry. You still have Wendell Moore, Josh Minot, and Leonard Miller on the books. So basically, Monte Morris, Kyle Anderson, Jordan McLaughlin are going to be the guys who are consistent or, in the rotation a little bit more than the other guys that are going to be hitting free agency. In my opinion, it's worth a look to see if any of those guys would be worth bringing back. But either way, you guys are way over the luxury tax. So the free agents you're going to be looking at, vet minimum guys to fill out the roster. But with that said, though, there's a lot of really good free agents out there. And the way this new CBA works, there's only going to be a handful of teams that have cap space. There's going to be, a few teams who have the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, another handful of teams who have the tax-paying mid-level exception. So there's not going to be a lot of teams out there with cap space. Even the middling teams like the Warriors, the Bulls, teams that were in the play-in don't have cap space. So there's going to be a lot of free agents out there that are signing for minimum contracts and trying to up their value with a new team next year. We're bringing back those initial 7 guys. I'm anticipating a Josh Minot or Leonard Miller, probably Minot because of his defense, promotion into the rotation. So, there's your guard, there's your big with Naz Reid, and a wing with Josh Minot. So let's see where we can fill in some of the other holes. Some guards that we might consider next to Seth Curry: Kyle Lowry, Monte Morris, Chris Dunn, Gary Harris, Josh Okogie, Alec Burks. So personally, I think Kyle Lowry and Monte Morris might be a little bit undersized. I just wouldn't want a backcourt with Seth Curry, and Kyle Lowry. Even though Kyle Lowry is a pretty good defender and Seth Curry can hold his own, I just would want a little bit more size. Chris Dunn, Gary Harris, a little bit bigger guards, more 3-and-D type guys, really good defenders. I think either of those guys would be really good options here. Josh Okogie, Alec Burks. Okogie is one of the best defenders in the league. Alec Burks is more of your offensive role player. But I think either of those guys could work as well. In my opinion, though, we drafted Ryan Dunn. I kind of want to see what he would bring. So let's look a little bit bigger. Kyle Anderson, Gordon Hayward, Najee Marshall, Nicholas Batum, Marcus Morris, Lamar Stevens. So these are more of your wing types, right? Your wings, forwards. Let's start with Kyle Anderson. Let's think about bringing him back, right? He played a pretty pivotal role for Minnesota last year until the playoffs. And then into the playoffs, he kind of became unplayable. So, I don't know if I really want to bring him back. Gordon Hayward, I think, would add some real offensive juice to this team, but he's not really consistently healthy. He's kind of a health risk. Najee Marshall, Nicholas Batum, I think are both really good options. Probably my favorite options that we've seen so far. Najee Marshall, though, I get the feeling he's going to get either the taxpayer mid-level or a non-taxpayer mid-level. He had a really good year last year, and he's a very versatile defender. So I think teams are going to be kind of coveting Najee Marshall. Plus, he's pretty young. Nicholas Batum, on the other hand, I think you guys really could get him on the minimum. I really like his fit, too. He's a vet who can come in and played really well in the playoffs last year. He can play some 4. He could play some 3. He can even play some small ball 5 if you decide to go that route. If a team decides to go small on you, you can use Nicholas Batum in that role. And considering Josh Minot is a little raw, he might not be ready. You can bring him in, bring in Batum for some versatility. Marcus Morris and Lamar Stevens. Now, Marcus Morris is an older guy, real, tough dude who can hit his open threes. I want somebody with a little more length. It's kind of the theme of the Timberwolves. Lamar Stevens does provide that length and stuff like that. Really good athlete, but really bad offensively. Not a very good shooter, spacer, or anything like that. So, I think we might skip out on that one. And some big men, right? Let's look at some, more 4-5 types, because Nas is real flexible. Let's get a big man rotation. Let's see what kind of options we have there. Jeff Green, he has a team option. Thaddeus Young, Dario Saric, Drew Eubanks, Mason Plumlee, Xavier Tillman. So Jeff Green and Thaddeus Young are like your older, bigs out there. I don't know how much either of them really have in the tank anymore. I think Dario Saric would be a really good fit here. He just brings something a lot different than your other bigs. Between Nas, Rudy, Cat, and him, like that's just a whole lot of versatility in your front court. Eubanks is just a hustle player. He plays really hard. He tries really hard. But I don't know. I'm not a big Eubanks guy. Plumlee has the history with Tim Conley. He was a Denver Nugget when Conley was, the GM of the Nuggets. I think that's worth a look. And Xavier Tillman, he's more of an undersized big man. He could play the 4, he could play the 5. He can shoot threes. He plays really hard. He's a tough guy. So I think he'd be really worth a lot of consideration as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and go with my favorite pick out of all those guys to add to the rotation. And to me, that's Nicholas Batum. I think he's just a perfect fit for this squad. Bring some veteran leadership. You're going to need that. You're going to need that in the playoffs. And like I said, I think he still has some juice. He played really well in the playoffs last year. And I think you can afford him. So that would bring us a 10-man rotation of Mike Conley, backed up by Seth Curry, Anthony Edwards, backed up by Ryan Dunn, Jaden McDaniels, backed up by Josh Minot, Karl Anthony Towns, backed up by Nicholas Batum, Rudy Gobert, backed up by Naz Reid, and a deep bench of Leonard Miller, Wendell Moore Jr., Patty Mills, Reggie Bullock, and that 37th overall pick. So let's talk deep bench first, right? We still have Leonard Miller, Wendell Moore Jr., who are some young guys I think still need some developing. But I think some vets that would be really beneficial to this team too are Patty Mills. He brings a lot of really good positive culture to the team. Plus you need some more point guard depth. And Reggie Bullock, he's an older guy who, in his prime was, real solid 3-and-D guy. Still can provide a little bit of that, off the deep bench. I think he'd be a really good veteran presence on the team as well. And then that 37th overall pick, right? A really solid guard rotation between Conley, Ant, Dunn, and Curry. I think that's just so much versatility in that guard group. You have really great stout wing defenders between McDaniels and Minot and even Nicholas Batum. And then, of course, your big man rotation of Cat, Rudy Gobert, and Naz Reid running it back. So, like a lot of little pieces added on the ends. But I think those little things really matter, especially when you're going into like Western Conference finals and in the finals. I think those are the type of things that set you apart, right? Having a guy like Nicholas Batum there who's been in big games and, shown up in big situations before, and also having enough youth and athleticism and, like young attitude and hunger between guys like Dunn, who's, got some real dog in him, Leonard Miller, Josh Minot, Wendell Moore Jr. If these guys can contribute anything throughout the regular season, you're deep as hell with this team. Very solid 1 through 10. I think this is just a really good roster. I would not be surprised at all if this team won the finals next year. But, everybody has their disagreements, and that's 100% fair. If you're like, there's no point in trading Nickeil Alexander-Walker, let's trade our pick away and see what we can get with that. I understand. I totally get it. Everybody has their right to their opinion. Please let me know what you would do to add to this team in the comments. Always good with the discourse. I love hearing it. Any criticism as well. I'm all ears. I love to hear it. Makes me better at this. If you like this kind of content, though, please consider subscribing to the channel. I'm trying to do every team before the NBA draft, which is going to be a task because the draft is like another week or so. I think I have like 4 or 5 more teams to go. So I got to get my grind on here. But if you like this, please subscribe to the channel. And if you're still here, that means you like the video. So hit that little like button, and I'll see you guys next time. I hope you have a wonderful day. Love y'all. Appreciate you guys. Have a good one. Talkin BS, we out.